not know why this music is not playing. I'm going to try it again. Here it goes. Oh, there it is. Let's go live. Hey. Pond Boss Magazine. Hello, everybody. Bob Lusk, the Pond Boss. Let's go live. Let's talk pond stuff. Let's talk about fish and all kinds of cool things. So join me here, and let's see if we can have a fun hour and add a little bit of energy and talk about your ponds and your fish and your lakes and all that kind of stuff. So let's do this. Let's see here. I don't know how many people we got watching. Looks like 0, so that's a good start. No, we got 4 people watching. Hey, y'all say hello to me so I'll know who's out there. Let's do this. You know what? I thought I'd start off tonight talking about a phone call I got today. I got a very interesting phone call today. And it was, the guy started off the call. He says, listen, I've bought some land. Hello, Tim Stewart over there near Okeechobee, Florida. Pondmeister himself, beekeeper, fascinating young man in his mid-20s, Tim Stewart. So I got this call, and the phone call started off like this. He said, I have just bought some land in South Texas, and I've had a pond built that's going to be about 1 acre, and I want, hello, Jacob West. Good gosh, you two guys are buddies, Jacob and Tim. They know each other from the Bob Lusk Institute of Higher Pondology. Yes, they do. There's Michael Airy checking in from Iowa. Jacob West is from Denison, Texas. So now we got 3 different states or 3 guys checking in. Good to see you guys. So anyway, this guy says, I want to have a pond where I can grow bluegills. Tim Stewart's not in the mid-20s. What'd you like rapid fire into the 30s or something? Yeah, let's go, Fred Bingaman. Me too. I'm glad to get these discussions ready to go. Okay. Hey, Benny Yobtown, I'm fixing to talk about you right here. We're going to have a conversation. Calls himself Quailman. Hey, Dave Davidson, one of the moderators on the Pond Boss website. Leah Cruz, Tulsa, Oklahoma. Actually, Beggs, Oklahoma. Deborah Corlew, good gosh, coming in from Illinois. 80 degrees here today in Texas. What's the best chemical to sequester phosphorus? Fred's already throwing out those questions. Hello, Jerry Siebert. Brent Rutan, Waxahachie. Man, I'm glad I'm back on too. I'm going to try to get to this phone call. I promise. What's the best chemical to sequester phosphorus? Well, you know what? I got an email from a guy that he actually came to LL Comatue, and we were looking at ways to sequester phosphorus. I don't know enough about his product, but I know that some of the products out there, one of them is called Phoslock, which is, I don't know enough about that product, but I know that the traditional way to sequester phosphorus in pond water that has too much phosphorus is aluminum sulfate. That's one way to go. Josie and Debbie are in the RV spending money, and Wayne is outside listening. Well, you know, Wayne and Josie, we broadcast from their RV last week. They're building a house. And Josie and Debbie have befriended each other, and Debbie is an absolute genius when it comes to designing interior things in a home. Actually, anything to do with a home, she's really good at it. And Wayne is sitting outside on the porch listening, winter, checking chicken dinner. Long-time fine, Brian fan. Hey, there's Mike Cottrell. Brian Epting, good to see you, buddy. So, Justin Ludwig. Oh, we got a good crowd. This is going to be so much fun. So anyway, Quailman, as he calls himself on Facebook, called me today. And it was a fascinating question, and I love the conversation. He said, I've just built a pond. It's about 1 acre in size, and I want to raise fish that I can eat on Sunday. Nobody asks me that question. So as I started thinking about it, I've been in a really intense Bible study lately, and I've just gone through the book of Leviticus, my least favorite book of the Bible, but it's real specific. So when he asked me that question, it struck a nerve with me. I thought, oh my gosh, here's a man that is following his rules of law and God's rules of law, and he is going to do it literally. And that's the first thought that came through my mind. So I said, okay, tell me a little bit about your pond. And he said, well, it's about 1 acre, and I asked him how it was shaped. It's an oval, And I had a reason to ask that question, and I'm going to tell you that here in just a minute. Hello, Jim Allen, checking in from Louisville, Kentucky. Not far from Pee Wee Valley. Woo, who knew that? Okay. So anyway, he said, I want to grow bluegills and maybe some red ear sunfish, and I want to eat those. And I said, well, I'm thinking about it. Hybrid sunfish would be a better bet for that because they don't reproduce so much. So I mentioned to him, thinking, hello, John Wilson. Good gosh, I'm so glad to see you, buddy. Checking in from Ohio. I'm so glad you're here. Chime in if you hear something. You want to pop in here, John, say something. Unless you're at spring training, which I'm sure you are. You always are at spring training this time of year. Iced tea. Not really. So anyway, the conversation was, as I thought about it, I thought, you know what, hybrids don't really fit the book of Leviticus. So I posed the question to him, or would you eat a hybrid cross between two different species? And he says, I'd rather not. Well, that told me what I needed to know. So then it was, let's dial into this. What can he do to raise fish to eat? Specifically, fish with scales. In a 1 acre pond, you can grow 800 to 1,000 pounds of catfish through the course of a year. But if you're following strict Hebrew traditions and what the Bible tells you to do, you're not going to eat fish that don't have scales. So that we can cross catfish, although I did broach the topic knowing what the answer was going to be. So as we were talking, what I told him was, you can raise bluegill, but what you got to do is you got to be prepared for their proclivity. They're going to reproduce a lot. And in South Texas, in Nixon, Texas, where he is, they're going to reproduce at least 5 times a year. So one of his questions was, do I need a predator to eat those fish? The bottom line answer is yes, whether it's you or some fish that you stock. So as we go, talking about this, having this conversation, it was, you can raise bluegill, but they're going to reproduce so rapidly that not many of them are going to be big enough. So you better be prepared for something to eat them or harvest some. So I pitched out the idea because he's talking about wanting to raise more food to help feed his family. Well, heck, you can use some fish for fertilizer if you want. Or you can be creative and grind them up and use them into something for something. I don't know what you can use them for. I've never been that hungry to ground up bluegill. But you might be able to figure out some other things you can do with them. So what I was telling him is be prepared to be culling a lot of fish. Whether you use a predator fish such as largemouth bass, or if you use a predator like hybrid stripers, even though you may not eat a hybrid striper, But one thing I didn't mention is that there's a market for those fish. Some of the smaller hatcheries around there, like there's Henneke Fish Farms, and then there's Herman's down near Corpus Christi. There's several of them that they might buy your excess fish and come even help you seine them out. But the bottom line is, in order to grow enough bluegills and red ear sunfish big enough to eat, you got to provide them a food source. And he's happy to feed his fish. I told him to feed a good feed and to go ahead and get past the sticker shock of a $50 bag of feed, feed the fish. And one thing I didn't mention is that if you feed a cheaper feed, like a grain-based fish food, you're not going to get the sizes that you want. You're not going to get the gains that you want. And the food conversion rates are way, way, way low. I did the math about a year and a half ago, and you're going to spend about 75 cents to raise a pound of bluegill on the cheap feed. You're going to spend about 92 to 95 cents to raise a pound of bluegills. Now that's live bluegill. That's not bluegill fillets. That's live bluegills. Now, what could he expect, or what can you expect from a pond? You can expect to be able to harvest a couple of hundred to maybe 250 pounds of bluegill per year spread out over the course of a season. You're not going to go in one day in a 1 acre pond and take out 250 pounds of edible bluegill, but what you can do is you can be culling some of those that are big enough to eat as other fish are growing into that void that you create by harvesting fish. Hello, Kenny Sanderson. Good to see you, buddy. So, is that doable? Yes, it is doable. He also said, okay, what about largemouth bass? Largemouth bass in a pond that's 1 acre in size. Oh, and he also fills it with a well. Another thing I didn't mention, I did suggest that he go get some water chemistry done on that well water, because There's some aquifers in that part of Texas that are notoriously heavy laden with metals and minerals that are not unhealthy. They're just a lot. There's a lot of calcium, a lot of sulfur. Sometimes there's some iron. There's oftentimes a heavy amount of carbonates. And you might be able to irrigate something with it, but over time, water quality is going to tend to deteriorate when you're really dialed in on raising fish for food. So you can raise 200 to 250 pounds of harvestable bluegill every year, along with another 30 to 40 pounds of harvestable sized bass through the course of a year in a 1 acre pond. So that's where we went with that. Y'all throw some questions at me. Don't make me think so much. Make me answer. We'll scroll back here and see here what's going on. Let's see here. Going back to Fred's question, what's the best chemical to sequester phosphorus? One of the ones that's the most popular right now is Phoslock. Let's see, what's that guy's name? Tim. Oh goodness. Kerry Martin knows a lot about it. He's in North Carolina, and one of the actual manufacturer's rep lives in North Carolina as well. And it's an aluminum sulfate based product. When you put aluminum sulfate in the water, the aluminum and the sulfate separate. The aluminum grabs hold of the phosphate. The aluminum sulfate. Yeah, aluminum grabs the phosphate, sequesters it, and it sinks to the bottom, where calcium grabs the sulfate and turns it into gypsum. Calcium sulfate is gypsum. So, there you go. How's that? Well, that's our chemistry lesson for the day. You're going to get me all wound up on chemistry. Let me scroll down here. Somebody's got to be throwing something out there. Come on. Hello, Steve Scharf. Talk to me. Bring me something here. So anyway, talking about raising fish for food, yes, you can within its limits. The thing about bluegill reproduce a lot. Red ear sunfish don't reproduce as much. Red ear sunfish feed in a different niche of the food chain because they eat crustaceans and snails and things like that. Hello, Drew Hay. Drew Hay is a premier pond builder from Pennsylvania, up north of Pittsburgh. I got to hang out with him last year for a little bit. So, Steve Sharp, you've got me hanging on the edge of my seat. Let's talk about chemistry. Let's go back to Wayne Lancaster a minute. My wife is hanging out up there with his wife, and they're figuring out how they can spend his dollars efficiently, Wayne, I might add. So then we'll see how that goes, because she really is good at that. She's not real good at a budget. Budget's a 4-letter word when I'm concerned around her. Is Phoslock just aluminum sulfate? Fred says, no, it's not. It's Phoslock, I'm embarrassed to tell you, it's got 3 or 4 different elements in it that buffers the pH as the aluminum sulfate does its work, and it helps keep the water chemistry from getting into disarray. That's the best way I can explain that. Steve Sharp, new ponds, still filling. How soon would you adjust the water chemistry? Adjust the water chemistry after you know what it is. So here's the way I would do that. With a brand new pond that's filling, especially if it's filling with rainwater, let the rain come in and hang out for a while. Let it be there a month or so. It's going to be muddy. You'll get a false reading if it's muddy. And then just let it sit. And then once it begins to settle out, then send a sample in. Because here's what happens. This is kind of a cool thing. When water first comes in a pond, it begins to absorb and dissolve everything it can. Now, there's a difference between dissolving and absorbing. It's going to dissolve things. It's going to absorb things. And once it's in that process, that's when you want to do the water chemistry, so you can see. Because here's something else people don't know. Water, pure water, doesn't conduct electricity. It insulates. It's the stuff that dissolves into the water or absorbs into the water that conduct electricity. Just a little trivial fact there. So what you need to see is what's dissolving or absorbing into the water, and you can measure that. That gives you a starting point to tell you what you might need to do to amend your water. Let's see here. Now we're getting some meat. Okay. Ooh, I'm going to back up here. I'm getting behind. Brian Epting, is feeding my bluegill once a day enough? It is right now. Start off now, especially if they'll eat right now. It depends on where you are. You know, if you're in northwestern Illinois like Deborah Corlew, don't feed the bluegill yet. They're not ready to start feeding. Once the water temperature hits the low 50s, bluegill will be ready to feed. And then when the water temperature gets into the mid 60s until the upper 70s, feed them twice a day. Feed them what they'll consume within about 30 seconds to a minute. If the feed hits the water and it's gone in 10 seconds, feed more. If it hits the water and it's still there after 3 or 4 minutes, feed less. The fish will tell you. I like to feed them twice a day when they're feeding actively because it only takes them about 8 hours to digest all their food. Now, I don't feed them 8 hours apart necessarily. I'd feed some now and then wait 4 hours and feed again because not all the fish are going to come to the feeder at once. You're going to get kind of like the house covey that likes to hang around the house. You know, and then, I mean, quail man, you ought to know that. If you've got quail, you're going to see a covey of quail hanging around your house, but you might get out on the ranch, you know, a quarter of a mile away and not see a quail for another quarter of a mile. All right, Steve says alkalinity or pH currently at 110 alkalinity and 6.5 pH. That's great. Those are good starting numbers. Now, what you'll see happen is as the alkalinity goes up, the pH should rise a little bit too, but as long as the pH is between 6 and 8, that's perfect. 7's perfect. You don't see perfect very often. Let's see what Mark Dyer's got going on here. Holy cow, good. I'm asking you to ask questions, and here they come. Our HOA-controlled 35-acre lake last year was stocked before I got on the board. Oh, you're going to pass off the blame, are you? Or not? I know, you're not going to take credit. I'm on the board this year with a voice. They stocked 51,000 minnows, 600 perch, a few hundred crappie, 250 walleye, and 150 wipers, 200 largemouth. Wouldn't our money be... Wouldn't our money be... hang on a minute. Let me do this. Wouldn't our money be better spent not stocking minnows and adding more forage fish like bluegill and perch to the order? The direct answer to that is yes. But that money might even be better spent on fish food. Grow your own. You know, so let me tell you, here's my opinion on that. I wouldn't stock a single fish unless I knew it was smart to stock those fish. And the only way to know if it's smart to stock those fish is to know the status of the fishery, which means, you know, at least every couple of years, do an electrofishing survey on a 35-acre lake. Get somebody out there that knows what they're doing. Take an inventory, take a census, and look at the ratios and look at the body condition of the fish. Now, if you don't have the budget to do an electrofishing survey, then I would at least keep some catch records, weigh and measure some predator fish. In your case, it's going to be crappie, walleye, perch, and largemouth bass, and even some of those wipers, hybrid stripers. Weigh and measure some fish. Then compare those to standards, then that's going to tell you what's lacking. If some of those fish are underweight, you're lacking food. And the odds are high that they're going to be lacking food with those numbers of fish. Now, I'll tell you this, it won't do any harm to stock those walleye every year. It probably is unnecessary. I know it's unnecessary to stock the minnows. It's probably unnecessary to stock the largemouth bass because most lakes, largemouth bass reproduce enough to recruit enough back into the population to replace those that go. So my best answer is to do an electrofishing survey at least every other year, and then from that data, then decide what to stock, and then go pull the trigger on that. Let's see here. Jacob West, any idea on how to entice the rain god to give rain? We need it badly. We're about to ready to pump from adjacent creek. Pump from the creek. You know what? We're in an El Nino. You know, you're along the Red River up there north of St. Joe, so, man, rain dance. Scott Schilling from up there in northern Indiana. Bob, if you have two identical ponds, size, fish stock, etc., but one would die, one without, how many pounds of fish could each carry at maximum carrying capacity? That's a loaded question. I'm going to unload it. I'm going to unpack it. The dye, here's what happens. The dye inhibits the production of plankton. Plankton is the base of the food chain. So without microscopic plants and animals, little bitty T90 parameciums and amoebas and algae and planktonic algae, things like that, that takes away the food chain for the next level, which is insects. Well, if the insects don't have enough food, then they can't do what they do to provide food for the next level of the trophic level of the food chain, which is going to be tiny fish and bigger insects. And if they don't have enough food, then it's going to extrapolate all the way to the top. So the carrying capacity of a pond with dye is going to be less than, now the carrying capacity, that's the loaded part of the question. The carrying capacity for both ponds is the same, except the ponds are different. So they'll have different carrying capacities because they have different water chemistry, have different depths, they'll have different habitats. But since this is a theoretical question, the true answer is both have the same carrying capacity. The difference is they don't have the same ability to produce the fish, because the one with the dye takes away from the pond's ability to produce fish. Now, why do people use dye? Well, one reason is they want it to look nice. Now, I don't know why anybody wants a pond to look like the Tidy Bowl man has been swimming in it, other than the other reason, which is to help minimize penetration of UV rays from the sun, which helps prevent aquatic plant growth. So that's the reason to have dye. John Moore, how long was Secchi disc for the data to become useful? About 10 seconds after you put it down in the water. So Secchi disc, I love that question. It deserves a really thoughtful answer. Secchi disc, okay, so here's what I think. Number one, most important thing in pond management is temperature. Temperature affects timing. Timing is the most important thing if you've got tasks, but the timing is triggered by the water temperature. So as the water temperature rises this next spring, you're going to see a chain of events. Certain plants begin to grow at certain temperatures. Not all plants grow at the same temperature. Algae in a lot of ponds in the United States right now is, you see all kinds of, I'm seeing them now, algae mats all over the place. Down here, I live on the Brazos River. Right there's algae in the river. It's because we've had a day or two of warm water, and it's such a volatile plant. So when you start checking visibility, write it down. So if your visibility today is 5 feet and the water temperature is 48 degrees, the temperature is going to be just as important as the visibility. Because what you'll see happen, especially as the pond ages, this happens more as the pond ages than it does in the very beginning. But as the water temperature goes up, the visibility goes down. And the reason the visibility goes down is because the plankton bloom starts to kick in. So nature won't allow nutrients dissolved into the water. Another reason to get a water chemistry test. So if you get a water chemistry test, you can see what kind of nitrogen and phosphorus and potash, potassium, all that kind of stuff you've got in the water, which is what feeds the microscopic plants and animals. Sequestering phosphorus, you're going to take phosphorus out of the water column, which renders it unavailable to plankton. Now, when you're in Illinois, like Fred Bingaman is, or Iowa, like Michael Ehrig is, or Illinois, like Deborah Corlew is, that's a big deal. Montana's probably got the most phosphorus per unit of water than any state on the planet, except maybe where Big Frog Wilson lives, in northern Ohio. I mean, they battle blue-green algae issues all day long, so I'm kind of running off on a little tangent to say this. The more fertile the water is, if the nutrients are balanced, you got to have the right amount of nitrogen and the right amount of phosphorus to grow the right kinds and the right amount of plankton. As that grows, then you're going to see the visibility begin to change. It's going to decline. So you put that Secchi disc down in the water when the temperature is 48 degrees, you're going to see 5 feet of visibility. Whereas in another 6 weeks, you'll put it in there and the water temperature is 54 degrees, you're going to see 5 feet of visibility. But boy, the minute that water temperature hits 60, it's going to change. And as it changes and you're monitoring it, you can begin to see a correlation between the temperature and the visibility. And if you don't see the visibility decreasing, then what you're going to have to do is start thinking about, well, do I need to promote a plankton bloom so I get some color in the water to try to prevent rooted plants from growing? So that's when you start looking at making decisions. So How long with the Secchi disc for the data to become useful? It's useful even right now. It's going to be useful to tell you don't do anything. You know, where it really gets useful is when the water temperature starts to grow up. Brent Rutan, okay, let's see here. Oh my gosh, I got skipped here. Woo! Let me back up a notch. Holy cow, look at all you guys. For eating fish with scales for food, how about adding some tilapia in May and harvesting what bass don't eat to stock the freezer in November? Guessing Nixon gets some filament nostalgia and meat. Yeah, and part of the reason I didn't talk about tilapia with him, tilapia could be a good idea. The problem is they won't die in the winter. And if you're okay with that, you know, then I can be okay with that. The thing is, now tilapia, they're even more prolific than bluegills are. So you're going to wind up with a whole bunch of little bitty tilapia, just like you will bluegill. Now here's the other deal, you know, that we can talk about in Nixon, Texas, is you can have a higher standing crop of tilapia than you can of bluegills. And tilapia are the fish Jesus used to feed the masses. So that's the fish that qualifies. So that's really a pretty good idea, as long as you can understand the nature of that animal and what they're going to do. So Nixon's going to get some filament nostalgia. Now, tilapia will eat fish food, and they will also eat algae. So I'm glad you brought that up. I thought about it today, but I didn't talk about it. Okay, Michael Ehrig, back with harvesting bluegills. I want to know what's best for the fishery as harvesting them, but I want to try to keep the big boys and girls size class of gills. Does slot size or gender matter? You know, gender. I used to totally believe that male bluegill got bigger than females. But after I started working on Richmond Mill Lake in North Carolina, I changed my mind. I saw as many huge female bluegill as I did males. But like if I'm quail man and I'm working on trying to grow fish for food, I'm going to be culling probably 3 times a year or 4 times a year, and I'm going to keep the best of the best and the next size down. Because as you harvest the best of the best, the next size down will come in and fill that gap. Mark Dyer, our lake also has a lot of gizzard, shad, and carp, and a few fishermen harvest fish. Most all catch and release. For a 35-acre lake with little angler harvest, would stocking muskie or tiger muskie at 1 per acre assist in population control by eating fish like an angler would harvest, but also aid in eating large shad? Most gizzard shad we see are 12 to 16 inches. Okay, we're going to tackle that one. This hour is going to go by real fast. Let's do a commercial. Hey, Pond Boss Magazine right there. There it is. $35 a year. Cheaper than a Friday night date, and it lasts a year. $35. I took Debbie out to eat last week, $70. I could have subscribed to Pond Boss twice. And seriously, that's the economy that fuels what we do with Pond Boss. So if you haven't subscribed, please do. Texas Hunter Feeders. I love Texas Hunter Feeders. San Antonio, they're made here. They're made in the United States. You know, they may have some components that aren't, but the feeder's made right here. They ship out the same day. Actually, I had a guy call me last week, and he was telling me that, let me think who that was. I tell you who it was. It was Wayne Lancaster. He's sitting there watching the show. His feeder flooded in a 15-inch rain that they had, and when the rain receded and the pond receded, he got all the soaked feed out of his feeder, and it still worked. And if it doesn't work, all you got to do is call Texas Hunter, and they're going to replace something. And it's. I'm not going to sit here and tell you they're going to do it for free, because most of the time they don't. But I have had occasions where somebody bought a feeder, had it a couple of months, something happened like that, and they'd replace a timer. You know, or they'll help you troubleshoot it if something does happen. So, Mark, here's the answer to your question. Do an electrofishing survey, then decide what to do. Now, here's the direct answer to that question. Tiger muskies are an outstanding choice to help in a Midwest or northern tier state. I'm going to say north of a line from Wichita, Kansas through Springfield, Missouri, maybe to St. Louis, going up that direction up into Kentucky. North of that line, tiger muskies could be a really good choice to help do that, to help control some fish. Then when you see gizzard shad that are 12 to 16 inches long, that typically means they're overcrowded. Gizzard shad give off a pheromone when they get too crowded, and they stop reproducing. Leah says, what do you estimate a cost to electrofishing survey to a pond about 10 acres? Kind of depends on where you are, but I'm going to say that the general number is about $1,500. Now, it kind of depends on who's doing it. You know, I've seen them cost as little as $800. I've seen them cost as much as $5,000, depending on the size of the lake and the detail. You know, but for $1,500 for a 10-acre lake in Beggs, Oklahoma, $1,500 is going to be that number, and you'll get a written report complete with the data, weigh and measure the fish, look at the ratios. The biologist will take a look at what the ratios of the fish are, you know, the different size classes of bluegill, size classes of bass, and all that kind of stuff. Drew Hay was talking to John and Tanya in Arizona, Outdoor Water Solutions. Did I hear a new Pondology Week might be on the horizon? Yes. Matter of fact, I'm going to go look at a venue on Thursday, and it's not far from where I live, and it looks like they can house about 20 people. They got a 20-plus acre lake. Sounds like a good venue, and I'm pretty excited about it. And as soon as I get that nailed down, then I'll announce it. And I'm thinking about doing another Institute of Pondology like in June. You know, that doesn't give me a lot of time to market it, but I've got the curricula ready. It's all ready to go. I just need to have the right place and to get enough butts in seats and people that I want to hang out with that want to hang out with me. Josiah, what are the effects of solar runoff to lakes? We have 5,000 acres of solar coming into our county. Oh, man, you know what? We're looking at that same thing right here. You know, where I live, they're talking about 4,000 acres of solar farm right next to the Brazos River. You know, they talk about that that it doesn't bother the ecosystem. Here's what I know. Nothing's going to grow under there. And I know that those solar panels, depending on where you are, like where I am, they'll get to be as hot as 140 degrees in the summer in the blazing heat. And my gut tells me, because let me tell you this, Josiah, I have dug into research, journals, everything I can find. There is zero information about the environmental impact of solar farms. Zero. And what I fear about here is if we get one of those pop-up showers in August, which is not unusual, and it drops a 2-inch rain on top of 5,000 or 4,000 acres of solar panels, that water, when it hits them, is going to immediately heat up, and then where's it going to go? Is it going to soak into the ground, or is it going to run into the river? Well, my gut tells me it's going to run into the river, and even if it only changes the temperature of the river 4 degrees in August or July or even September, that's enough to trigger a fish kill and a blue-green algae bloom where it otherwise would not exist. Now, the river flow rates where I am are 19 cubic feet per second, that's not much on a river that's 100 yards wide or wider than most places. So it's running shallow over rocks. The river's going to be warm anyway. So I don't have a good answer for that, and I can't find a good answer for it. But as a fisheries biologist and a conservationist and a steward, I don't think it's going to be good for bodies of water. Now, you know, with solar runoff into lakes, I think, my opinion is going to be the temperature factor is going to be the biggest factor. I don't think there's going to be any chemistry change. I can't imagine that because it's hitting glass, basically. The other concern I've got is those solar panels have a short life. Then what? You know, and they're not profitable, or they wouldn't need a government subsidy. You know, so there's so many things about that I just don't know. Brian Epting, looking at getting snails for algae control. What are your thoughts? No. Trapdoor snails. No, don't do that. Don't do that. I don't know where you are because I forgot. But I would not do that. I wouldn't do it. The bad side effects are then you got snails. Snails are the primary host for a number of parasites that fish get. So then when you get trapdoor snails, if they're too big for your red ear to eat, then you got a new problem. You're trading problems. So I would look at something else. Hello, Peyton Igo. Good to see you, buddy, from Shreveport, Louisiana. Walleye are never caught. There's very few in there. Our bass population is below average in numbers, and they're outcompeted by overpopulation of channel cats and crappie. I'm the homeowner that feeds. It definitely helps my, come on, Bob. I keep touching this with my finger and weird things happen. It definitely helps my bluegill and attracts catfish so I can harvest them by line or bow fishing. The catfish are always fat. I record the largemouth catches, and relative weights are usually 84 to 92%. Well, if your bass numbers are low and the relative weights are low, that's a sure sign that you've got enough carp and gizzard shad in there that they're out competing and disrupting probably the first or second trophic level of the food chain, which means to all of us that they're taking up too much space and eating too much feed at the primary level. Do you guys know why they call a gizzard shad a gizzard shad? I hear Jacob West. I hear him. He knows it. So does Tim Stewart. Drew Hay might. A gizzard shad is a gizzard shad because it has, drumroll, a gizzard. When you look at a gizzard shad, its mouth is underneath its face. Any fish that has a mouth underneath its face feeds on the bottom. So carp and gizzard shad are bottom feeders, which means that they're picking nutrients out and insects and whatever's in the muck, and they're processing that, and then some of that turns into flesh. The rest of it goes right back into the bottom of the pond. And so they're disrupting the food chain and taking up enough space that they're out competing for food and space all these other fish. And when you got that many gizzard shad, they're probably disrupting reproduction too, because they can invade bluegill nests, and when you got a 12-inch long gizzard shad, then they're going to disrupt things. Girlfriend, you're going to have to wait. Get up here. Come here. Come on. She's telling me she needs to go pee, but I'm not going to let you out. I'm doing a live Facebook show, baby. Give me kisses. My girlfriend right here. I tell people it's pretty funny. I've had a blonde and a brunette and a dark-headed girl, and that's just Debbie. This is my first redhead. She's a good puppy. So, when you've got gizzard shad and you've got carp, they're in there, even though they may not be directly competing against largemouth bass, there's enough competition that's going to disrupt the bass from reproducing it won't stop them totally from reproducing, it stops recruitment. And the fact that the channel catfish are fat, they're probably big too. They're 5 to 15 pounds. That being the case, they're probably the dominant predator. And you can stock more bass, more bluegill, more crappie until the cows come home. But if you've got too many gizzard shad, too many carp, too many big catfish, there's a reason for that. There's a reason that you're not getting the recruitment and the reproduction of those other fish. So throwing some dollars into stocking is a crapshoot. You might as well go to Las Vegas, hit the blackjack tables and see if you can earn enough money to make your budget bigger. Whereas going back to that original statement about doing a survey and to go in and really scientifically analyze that fishery, that's going to give you better information. Then you can decide, because it may be heck, we need to pay that electrofishing boat another $1,000 to stay there some time and harvest as many shad as we can, or harvest some more, carp, or harvest some catfish. Or it may be that you have a catfish tournament and then donate all the fish to the fire department for a fish fry. So I can't tell you spending money on fish to stock fish is smart. I can tell you don't buy fathead minnows. That's a waste of money. That'd be like if I gave girlfriend just a treat. She'd like it. I'd feel good. She'd smile at me, and it'd be gone. Nothing to help grow more dog. I'm going to put you down. I'll come let you out in a minute. So, she's not happy with me, but oh well. Scott Hamilton. Oops, I flew by here. Hang on a minute, buddy. Good gosh. Holy cow, I'm behind. Woo! Y'all bear with me when I'm down. I'm way behind. I'm going to catch up right now, I promise. I got to click here. Scroll down. Come on. Scroll down. Okay, Scott Hamilton has a half-acre pond in Abilene, Texas. I have an issue with green algae water since last summer after I installed 2 aerator heads. How can I clear this up? Flushing rain. When you have green algae water since last summer when you install the aerator heads, I would do 2 things. One thing is I would put that aerator on a timer starting when the water temperature hits about 80 degrees. and I would set the timer to kick the aeration system on at 9 o'clock at night and kick off at 9 in the morning. The other thing is what's going on, what the aeration system is doing is it's kicking those nutrients up and mixing them throughout the water column, which is fertilizing the water. So that's nature's way of utilizing those nutrients. The second thing you can do is stock some tilapia. If you'll stock tilapia, they'll start consuming some of that algae. The babies will. Now, the adults won't. Stock about, I'm going to tell you, in a half-acre pond, doing what you're doing, I'd probably stock 20 pounds, which is overdoing it a little bit. But they're going to help you convert some of that algae to flesh. Scott Schilling, you'd make a good politician. I'll send you a text later. Don't vote for me. I already won everything I want. I've won more than I want. What type of cost can be estimated per acre for Phoslock treatments? Mark, I don't know. Honestly, I've never done it. I really don't know. I don't know. There's people on here that do. So expect to get a message. Heck, you might hear from Scott Schilling. He's in the pond management business in northern Indiana. Tom Davis checking in from Ohio. Kenny Sanderson. Okay, there you go. Philip Benefield, the best explanation I've ever heard for determining whether fertilizer is needed. Thanks. You bet. Hey, Kerry Martin, there you are. Congratulations. Thank you very much. What about pH and alkalinity with your water quality explanation? Not sure what you're asking me, but here's what I think you're asking me. pH, all that is a measurement. It's like a ruler. You got 12 inches of visibility because the ruler says so. You know, you can measure how many gallons of water. Gallons is a measurement. pH is a measurement. All pH is a measurement of the acidity, how acid your water is compared to how basic your water is. So pH of 7 is the same as 0. Every point you go away from 7, let's go down. A pH of 6 is 10 times more acid than a pH of 7. A pH of 5 is 10 times more acid than a pH of 6, which means it's 100 times more acid than a pH of 7. So the pH is a measurement. All it does is tell you should be looking at something. Alkalinity is either how much calcium sulfate there is in the water or how much calcium carbonate there is dissolved in the water. The alkalinity is the go-to measurement in fishing ponds because that is the backbone of what allows the bottom trophic level of your food chain to develop. So, you know, if your alkalinity is under about 40 parts per million, you can fertilize till the bulls come home and you're not going to get a plankton bloom, or not likely to get a plankton bloom. So the alkalinity is the measurement you're really looking for. The pH just gives you an idea of to look for something. You know, if your pH is 5.3, you need to be looking for something. It won't be the pH because it's only measuring something. If you have a pH of 5.3, you've got a source of acid or all your alkalinity is gone. The alkalinity is like Rolaids or Tums, or in my case, Prilosec. It helps prevent reflux. It helps keep that pH from spiking up and down. Doug Biggs, I have a 4-acre pond that I hate to admit I've failed to maintain properly. Well, you and several million other people. We built it 9 years ago when the fish grew fast and everything was amazing, but we failed to remove as many fish as we should have. Bass and bluegill are now overpopulated. What is my best course to get it back on track? Harvest. Since you built it 9 years ago, it peaked out at about 6. It started to decline about that time, which means you should have been harvesting fish by about year 4, 5, and 6 in order to try to keep it in balance. Now, you know, in school, we were taught to balance a fishery. Can't happen. Took me a long time to figure that out. I worked my butt off to balance so many fishing lakes. Never happened. Now they pass each other. You know, here's the food, here's the predator fish. They get here, oh, then this happens, then you get these numbers down, then this goes up. So it's a seesaw. You know, so what I would do to start, Doug, is I would start weighing and measuring as many bass as you can, and then get some kind of an idea of what kind of bluegill population you've got. If you got very many bluegills, I'd consider feeding them. If I remember right, Doug, I think you're in North Carolina. I think it'd be a good spot to be feeding fish over there. And if you start feeding those bluegill, if they're overpopulated, if bass are overpopulated, bluegill probably aren't. Now, big bluegill might be high in number, But if the bass are overpopulated, I guarantee you they're eating the young bluegills. So you don't see a lake ever that's overpopulated with bass and bluegill. It's usually one or the other. So collect some data. You might want to get Foster Lake Management Company to come over there or Solitude to come over there. James Allen, could I put walleye in our Kentucky Bass Lake? Walleye would do pretty darn good in that lake, other than you don't have a lot of depth and a lot of the best walleye habitat, but you can buy small walleye cheap enough that it would be at least worth a shot just to see. Hello, Elena. I missed you too, baby girl. I've got some great pictures of Elena and her sister, Chuck Brinkman's daughters, and they're over there kind of northwest of St. Louis, Missouri, and those girls are absolutely amazing. They're being raised right. I've watched it firsthand. They know how to fish. They know how to raise fish. They even do science projects on fish. Jason Nepstad. Oh my gosh, over there, Fayetteville, North Carolina. I've been to Jason's Lake. I've electrofished it, and Jason is one of those guys that's deeply passionate about trying to grow fish. The hard work on our lake is finally paying off. 30 minutes of fishing. I typically have 15 bass, 5 pounds to 9 pounds, all schooling daily. Only in the winter, though. Well, you know, you set the stage, you set the table, you got the food chain. You know what? You guys, if you haven't friended Jason, I hope you get a big flurry of friend invites. Show them some of your videos. He's got some of the most amazing slow motion videos of giant bass blowing up on threadfin shad around his dock. His dock is a dadgum threadfin shad magnet, and he's the magnate. The dock is the magnet, and those fish blow up. It's really fun. He's also got pictures of otters eating his big fish. You got some of those F1 tiger bass everybody hears about. Okay, so looks like Mark Dyer and Kenny Sanderson are having a good conversation. Peyton I go on a 30-acre lake where pH average is 7.1 alkalinity, 47 parts per million calcium, 15 parts per million hardness is 54. Last year, clarity was over 30 inches and full of Cara and Naiad. Most mechanically removed. Now the water is reaching 60 degrees. Would you use a high phosphorus, more fertilizer with all the Cara and Naiad history and still some left? Yeah, I think I would, because here's the thing. Okay, Cara is also called skunk grass or muskgrass, but it won't grow unless the alkalinity is pretty high, because Cara has kind of an exoskeleton. If any of you take Cara out of a pond and lay it on the shore, it's bright green, almost a lime green color, but you come back in a week, it's powdered white like snow, because when the chlorophyll goes away, all that's left is the calcium carbonate lime. So what goes on there, part of the reason the alkalinity is lower than what it should be at that pH, which is a measurement, is because it's that Cara is taking up some of that alkalinity. So now got to remember Peyton is over near Shreveport, Louisiana. So I would be real tempted to go ahead and fertilize that lake if the water is 60 degrees going up, and you're pretty confident that it's going to stay that way. I would use a high phosphorus fertilizer. I would start off with about 3 pounds of phosphorus. So look at your numbers. If it's like a 1034 ZR, 1137 0, calculate how many pounds of phosphorus in that formulation, and use about 3 pounds of phosphorus per surface acre to start and see if you can initiate a bloom. All right, let's see what else we got here. Good gosh, it's already 7:19. Hey, Leah, I forgot to do that. Hashtag Pond Boss Magazine. Click like. Share this video to your timeline, and you're going to be eligible for a drawing for something. Probably a hat. I was at the office a few days ago. I think I gave away all my hats here. But I'll get Leanne to do a drawing here in a few days for everybody. If you will hashtag Pond Boss Magazine in the comment section, click like, and share this video to your timeline, then you'll be eligible for that drawing. Hey, Stan Lee, good to see you, buddy. Present for the week. Hi, Bob. Hope you all are doing well. By the way, congratulations. Thanks, buddy. I tell you what, long overdue and very much deserved. I tell you, I'm very humbled by that. You guys that are regulars to this show knows that I was recently elected into the Texas Freshwater Fishing Hall of Fame. And when I got that news, the guy that called me, Billy Higginbotham, I've known Billy probably 35 years. He's a retired fisheries extension specialist with the Texas AgriLife Service, based out of College Station. He lives in Overton, Texas, near Tyler. And when he called me, just the kind things he said just brought a lump in my throat. And I've been getting emails from people saying things, telling me stuff. I'm just glad it happened while I was alive, so I could hear all this stuff. If you got something nice to say to somebody that's meaningful in your life, do it now. I'm telling you, it's real meaningful. I got an email yesterday from a longtime friend / client, and we had some really in-depth conversations way back in the 80s and early 90s. He was a professional angler back then, had a full-time job as a sales guy, but he fished as many tournaments as he could, most of them in Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, wherever he could, Oklahoma some, and he won a lot. And he was so good at it that he would be invited to give speeches at fishing shows and tackle shows and clinics and stuff. And the comment that he made to me, he says, Bob, after talking to you about trophy bass fishing behavior, I started to implement some of the things I learned from you that you don't learn by fishing, and it worked. And it changed the way that I fished, and it helped me win some tournaments. Well, I never knew that. Another comment he made is that, you and I were talking about artificial structure back in the early 80s, which is the truth. I mean, I designed some artificial structure back then. There wasn't a demand for it, and I was making it out of PVC pipe. And so I was making some of these PVC pipe structures back like in 84, 85, 86 through there. And I had to make a decision. Do I want to raise fish or do I want to cut pipe? And there was nobody that would do it where it would justify it. So I quit doing it. And now, there's all kinds of people doing it. It's very well worth it. Okay, let me see here. What else we got? Okay, Josiah, thanks for the feedback on the solar farm. I appreciate it. Sorry you guys are dealing with. Yep, I see a lot of drawbacks on all levels. Yeah, and you know what? They only work when the sun's out. If the cloud comes, they don't work. Okay, looks like we got another conversation. Lathram, which bait fish has the best chance then? I've lost the context of that question. I'm going to tell you. Let me do this. Bluegill are the backbone of the food chain for largemouth bass. Threadfin shad are outstanding, especially at the latitude where you are, near Longview, Texas, Marshall, that area. Threadfin shad are outstanding. Gizzard shad, I love gizzard shad. They just can get too big too quick. And if they're not in the right ratios with a big enough predator base to eat them before they get so big, then they're a good choice. Golden shiners can be a good choice. My number one go-to, bluegills. Number two, probably right behind them, would be maybe red ears tied with threadfin shad. Threadfin shad, they're a little bit misunderstood. They're filter feeders. So they tend to live in the water column, gleaning their food from the water column. And they reproduce prolifically. And when a baby gizzard shad is 90 to 120 days old, that's big enough to reproduce. So their numbers can get exponential fairly quickly, just within 60 to 90 days in some cases. The thing is their lower lethal temperature is 42 degrees. When it hits 42, they die. So they won't work in Iowa. And if they do, they'll work for about 6 or 8 months out of the year. But they'll work great in Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, all the southern and southeastern states. Let's see, Brian Kazar. Or Kaiser. I got tiger bass last year. Is there a way to identify them when I start harvesting? You know what? Maybe so. When you catch a tiger bass and you put it in your live well and you look down on it, its back will be mildly mottled. M-O-T-T-L-E-D. So it will have a kind of a camo look. Now, Florida bass are vividly mottled. So they look like they have dark green blotches on their backs, where the tiger bass have green blotches, but they're a little more faded. Northern strain bass on the other hand, don't have that modeling look to them all at all. Tim Stewart, what are the key points to raise good plankton blooms instead of blue-green algae? A lot of that's temperature related, but here's the biggest key point is blue-green algae thrives when the nitrogen and phosphorus are out of balance, and it's typically because there's not quite enough nitrogen. Now, there's an article coming up in the next issue of Pond Boss, one of the best articles that we published on Inside the Water column, Dr. Claude Boyd. He is the world's leading authority in aquaculture water. So he's dialed his career into helping fish farmers around the world, from the Philippines to the Mississippi Delta to Japan, Vietnam. I mean, he's worked all over the world, and he gets water chemistry, especially for highly productive ponds and lakes. He's also an expert in sport fishing ponds. He's written probably the best article I've seen that he's written for our magazine, coming up in the March-April issue, which is at the printer right now. It's about to go out here in another 6 or 7 days. And the key points that he hit there is that a lot of that's temperature related. And the topic of that article is climate change. And he hits it from a perspective that you don't hear in the media, that you don't read about, you don't hear from on CNN or Fox or any of those, or ABC, CBS. He hits it deep down from the truth. So that's a good enough reason right there to subscribe to the magazine. $35 for that one article is going to be worth it. Hey, Pond Boss Magazine, $35 a year, cheaper than a Friday night date. We got 4 minutes left, boys and girls. All right, Mark Dyer, what's the difference between a standard yellow perch and what they call a jumbo perch? Curious, as in Nebraska, we have some decent perch fishing lakes, but everyone wants to ice fish the Dakotas for the jumbos. Are they better fed regular perch in a better habitat to get bigger? I'm going to give you my opinion. I think that's a population in an environment where only the best of the best can thrive. Typically has to do with the food chain and population numbers. So it's not that they're any more genetically superior. It's not that they have any kind of great advantage. It's just that they've gotten selectively bred by natural circumstances, kind of like the Galapagos Islands. Why do they have such giant iguanas and tortoises? Because they're kind of in an island, and only the best of the best can thrive, and the biggest ones are the ones that develop over a longer period of time. There's my opinion. I'm going to stick with it for now. All right. Ooh, there's Dr. District, Howard District. Bass fry-on beds in North Florida in mid-February. Who'd have thought? Dude, I know. So much for climate change, global warming, and all that stuff. You can't trick a bass. You cannot trick a bass. Yep. All right. Looking forward to seeing that article. My first attaboy, Steve. Hey, you can go to pondboss.com, and there's a link up there up at the top that you can click on, and will take you to the buyer's page, and you can buy a subscription right there online. All right, Christopher Aguilar, the Boudin man from down there in South Louisiana. Good to see you, buddy. I know you're a little bit late, but glad you're here. So you got here just in time, then I'm going to wrap things up. So, hey, Jason Dodd, speaking of Texas Hunter feeders, does anyone know the footprint of one? Have contacted the company with no answer. I'm going to tell you, those feeders are probably 18 inches square, 30 inches tall. If you get dock legs, they're in the same footprint. If you get the adjustable legs, they're probably going to be 24 to 30 inches apart. That's going to be my answer. The forum is, Justin's going to put a plug in for Ask the Boss forum. Thanks, buddy. Mark Gaffney, you make me miss my pond. Well, hey, need to get a little closer to that pond and do it to it. John Dyer, good to see you. Appreciate the comments. Hey, guys, thank you so much for watching the show. You guys kind of keep me going. I'm glad to be able to do it again, and we're going to keep firing this off. I'm going to do it every Tuesday night for a while until I can't or don't want to. So Once again, thanks for watching, and I will see you next Tuesday. Adios for now.